right, it is digging for wisdom time. We're in podcast number 2 because we are talking about week number 1. We go to 2 to talk about 1, and we're going to preview week 2, obviously. But Diggs,
I think you're too old, Ward, to be going number 2 to be talking about number 1 and vice versa. It sounds like that might be a trip to your general practitioner. I would like to encourage you to make sure you do that annual visit.
Hey, you're the one who has the scheduled dump every Friday at 12, so maybe you need to pay a visit
There's
to
something about being regular. Every midnight on Friday night, you know what you're going to get, and that is one of the best high school football shows, one of the best recap shows of DFW football. We call it the dump, and it even goes a little bit further. We'll sometimes touch a little bit about East Texas, and my guy Anthony Blaylock, he even gets into 8-5A for us in Region 1. So we know what's going on down there with Port Arthur Memorial and Barbers. Did you ever find out where Barbers Hill was, by the way?
We figured it out, Mount Bellevue. Okay. I just don't know where it is on a map, but it's somewhere down there. It's just within the Houston radius. That's all that matters to me.
So if I gave you $1,000 today, Ward, and I said if you can get to Barbers Hill High School or Mont Bellevue, but you get no map, no GPS, you just got to go. Could you get it? Could you get there?
Eventually. How long would you give me to get there? Did you say?
I mean,
in this scenario. I'm going by
hours.
district alone. I'll figure out where all the district schools are, and then I'll just drive around aimlessly until I see a summon. So I'll probably get there in 8. I'll get down there in 4. And get lost in the other 4 and eventually get there.
You think you can do? Okay, I like that, Ward. I like that you're.
If I don't have a map, but I can call Tom Westenberg up, right? I have his cell phone. Hey, I'm sitting in the middle of Angleton. You're way off. Dang it, Coach. Help me out here.
What about Pearland or Manville or one of them places?
Yeah, exactly. I can get to those easily. All right, let's get into this thing, dude. Because you go into the season with questions, and then you come out of week 1. Some of those questions are somewhat answered, but then you get more questions on top of those questions. And the biggest questions we have going into week 2 is how some of these teams are going to survive with their injuries they got in week 1. Now, DeSoto didn't have to worry about surviving because they got the week off, but Tiger Ryden, he got the dislocated elbow, and that's kind of they're not giving us a timetable, but it looks like it's at least 3 or 4 weeks, it would seem, if not more. I mean, they put something on it right off the bat. But I don't think that injury is as bad as the ones that happened up in McKinney. If Mekhi Frazier with the boot on his foot, and I think that was just something with the shin, and then Brian Jackson also had the broken collarbone or broken elbow deal, or dislocated elbow, and those are major players that they can't just fill in. Like DeSoto can probably find 2 or 3 running backs on the 2 deep or 3 deep that could do somewhat what Tiger could do, but the McKinney injury seemed a little bit more pressing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get a little TMI right now. I got a little bursa sac injury. I don't know if you can see that right there, but it's a little bit swollen right there from my weightlifting kind of a thing. It's fine, but every now and then when I try to extend that arm like that, I'll feel a little bit of stiffness. I can't even imagine trying to play with this thing completely dislocated from the socket or whatnot, and not to mention the pain. I'm a wuss with just a little bit of a bursa sac. And for McKinney, and I'm going from what you're telling me privately. I know you don't like when I share all your private information with us, but we're kind of worried about this with McKinney in the first place. They don't have a lot of depth. They don't have a lot of the offensive line is probably their weak part, and their skill players, their frontline players are fantastic. But you get past that, top 22, it really deteriorates pretty quick. So when you start chunking out some of those big players, I get very concerned about McKinney. In fact, in the rankings this week that you may have already seen on our website throughout our social media, I dropped McKinney under Denton Geyer just because of that uncertainty. That's not to say that, I was not impressed with what McKinney did against Longview. I was very impressed, but when you start to whittle away at that depth, that's a big concern to me. And I know they're going to have Berkner this week, which should be a pretty winnable game, even with a little bit of depth issues. But you get into that district play, and you're going to have all hands on deck for the top 4 anyway. So I'm very concerned about them. Hope we get an update soon. Hope our guy Shavers will give us the deets when it comes to that. But more importantly, I think I can speak for you. I can't always speak for you, board, but our best wishes for those two to get healthy and happy and make a decision that not only impacts this season, but impacts their long-term success. It's not worth necessarily risking, a career just to try to get back in there too prematurely. So I know they've got great doctors in McKinney. Obviously, the DFW area is chock full of great orthopedics and arm surgery, all that stuff, all the great doctors. And I know our guy coach, he's no longer a coach anymore. Superintendent Pratt obviously has athletic support on the mind of everybody over there in McKinney ISD. So I think they'll make good decisions for them. But I'm worried, and I hope that they're going to be okay, and I hope they can play safely.
It took away from us with such a good win. I mean, the defense, I don't want to say it took away, but it kind of dampened it a little bit. Especially, I mean, they got what I call the triplets with those two guys, and then Xavier Philisimi, and he came out and made all the plays you needed. I mean, Dallas Morning News gave him the Defensive Player of the Year or the week, and can't disagree with him. He caused the fumble, he broke up passes left and right, caused a fumble at the end of the game, and the defense just stood tall against that Longview team. But you walk off the field, and by the time you get to the locker room, you're thinking, okay, 2 of the 3 are out for a game or two. This is going to be a tough hill to climb, but let's see if we can do it. Let's talk quickly a little bit about week 1 of the games you saw offensively. Maybe not even the games you saw. I'm going to just throw you 2 names. Who do you think had the better week between Duncanville's DeCorian Moore, receiver, and Parker Livingstone, who you saw at receiver for Lovejoy's, because they both put up unbelievable numbers?
Yeah, they did. I think when you consider just competition, DeCorian Moore might get a little bit of the edge. But, what I was impressed with Parker Livingstone, and this is a bit of a difference between DeCorian Moore, is that Livingstone has been kind of overshadowed in all of these great receivers over there. You had Kyle Parker last year. You've even got Dalen McCutcheon, and now we got the Jalen Lott kid over there. And this was really his first chance to shine, and he absolutely shone. I mean, I think the tools, obviously, Duncanville, DeCorian Moore has probably got a little bit of the better tools, but I think Parker Livingston really set himself up for success. I overheard a little bit of a birdie in the press box talking about that maybe he should be considered for a 5-star rating as opposed to a 4-star rating based on if they continue to see this level of play. Obviously, throwing a touchdown, returning a kick for a touchdown, even though it got called back, it was still the spirit of that he had that kind of quality outing. So overall, Parker Livingstone has nothing to be embarrassed about, but obviously you're talking about 2 elite names that we may be seeing on Sunday. So, but South Oak Cliff, I think, probably had a little bit more of an athletic presence to where that was a little bit more impressive than what College Station had.
And then the defensive side, just the wild thing about that South Oak Cliff Duncanville game is we had Colin Simmons on the show this past week, and he and Pat Donley was actually at the game, was talking about how Sock didn't even call their play until they saw where Colin Simmons was set up. And if he moved to the other side in the middle of him play calling, they ran it the other way. So they obviously heard about his 40-sack quest and made sure he didn't start off with any, because he didn't come close to getting any sacks in that game. They didn't run anything his way. But what we did see is, I hope you like burgers, because we saw a lot of 50 burgers or more on week 1, a lot of statement games, a lot of teams out there saying, this is who we are, take a look at us, be fearful of us. And scoring that many points, it really does pass the eye test for some casual fans and some hardcore fans as well. To talk about what it means to kind of put that kind of punishment on a team.
Just getting to watch some of these games, you really get a chance. And I hate going to blowouts. So, when I have to go to a blowout, I get a little frustrated because I like seeing competitive football game. I'd rather see a Seagoville Trimble Tech game that's going to go back and forth 17-14 than seeing Duncanville put 60 on even a good team. I want to see very good competitive football. And as you and I got a chance to see at the Jerry Jones Classic at the Star, Rockwall, when they got up 42-0 mid-second quarter, they were just that much better than Cedar Hill. And, nothing Cedar Hill could do, they couldn't, they had penalties offensively, they had special teams mistakes. They were a mess, and Rockwall was crisp. They knew how to execute. They had big plays. They had receivers and running backs and quarterbacks, multiple quarterbacks, much to my chagrin. We're gonna have like a little segment about how Diggs hates the two quarterback system at some point. We're gonna start calling people out with that, but it was not Lovejoy this time. Lovejoy stuck with one quarterback the whole game. In fact, he got hurt and he was coming in to be hurt, but he's like, you're not pulling me out of here. I'm not ever coming out of this game ever again. But Lancaster and Cedar Hill and some of these other programs, Rockwall with two quarterbacks. And that gets to the whole idea that you are kind of those style points. When you are up 49-0 or 50-0, I'm thinking of Lewisville and Naaman Forest. Naaman Forest was down to 50-0. And Naaman Forest is not a trash team. They're a team that I'm expecting to make the playoffs still in Garland ISD. But when you are down 50-0 to a team, that means Lewisville completely dominated it. And what was hilarious was I don't know if it's hilarious, but when I go to check out the stats, Lewisville only had like 240 yards. They didn't have any eye-popping numbers. All their big dogs that you would expect to have these big numbers, Byron Ellison ran the ball 4 times for like 12 yards and 2 touchdowns because their defense was constantly creating pressure because they were just so much better from 1 to 22 than Naaman Forest. So when I see teams like Frisco Reedy, who did that last year, they jumped out on teams like Denison and Azle last year, 50-60-0, and now they're playing like 37-14 kind of a games. It shows me that they are not necessarily the team that they were last year. And then I see these eye-popping numbers, South Lake Carroll, Forney are some of the teams that just go out there and they throw up huge numbers on you, or even McKinney North. I know you had a chance to see that against Garland, and you can argue, well, maybe it's Garland playing bad, and I know you didn't. You said that Garland really struggled to get offensive rhythm and defensive stops, but McKinney North, they were just able to do that, able to progress, and able to run their offense, and then have their second team come out there and kind of play around in the second half with things. You make those statements, and when you make those statements, it shows me that you're that good. Frisco Emerson's another team. Frisco Emerson, you remember you were at that Frisco Emerson Hillcrest game last year. They had to come back in the second half to win a very thrilling game. This year, 69-3. Right. That's a difference. That is a dominant team, and we're not getting that from the Frisco Reedies of the world. So for me, style points matter, and I like to see that because when you're better than another team, it's going to come across in the score.
And it kind of enlightened you with North Crowley this year, too, because they played St. Houston last year. You weren't impressed with the margin of victory. And so Coach Gates said, okay, Diggs, take a look at this. And this year you were a lot more impressed by that margin of victory. Boy, your statement about Lewisville is so true. When you can go up 50-0 at halftime without exerting much energy whatsoever, I mean, that doesn't, not only does it bode well for the actual game because everybody gets to rest, but the following week, everybody looks at that and they're like, oh, good Lord Almighty, what are we about ready to go up against? And that's, I mean, that brings me up. I don't know if you have any more comments about it, but it brings me up to the first game I want to talk about, which is that Lewisville Highland Park game coming up at Highland Park. Now, Highland Park was impressive against Flower Mound Marcus, considering we didn't really know what they had going into it. Another team that put up a 50-burger. But to see a team like Lewisville come in there, I'm not on the fence of who's going to win this game. I think the Farmers are going to win, but I'm certainly on the fence about the score because I'll always stick with they're playing at Highlander Stadium. There's something there that will keep it from being 50-0 at halftime, obviously, but I think it'll keep it to within a 2 to 3 score game.
No, I think that's going to be the fun thing about this because I think a lot of people are like you. They think that Lewisville is going to win this game, but that Lewisville is not going to go in there and roll them. And you clipped this out last week, Ward, and you got me in trouble with our friends in DeSoto. You're using that projection. You're trying to take the power off of
you. Owe somebody some barbecue, I think.
and they put it on me after that, because I didn't think that DeSoto was going to go into Allen, especially Allen Eagle Stadium, a place with a really good home field advantage, and just bully them and beat them up. And we're having the same exact conversation now, and except we're talking about Lewisville and Highland Park. Except that now that we have Highland Park with a really good win, it even looks even more improbable that Lewisville is going to go in there and beat them. But if Lewisville is who I think they are, just like I always said, if McKinney was who I thought they were, they're going to beat Longview. It didn't have to be pretty, but they were going to beat them. Same thing with Lewisville. If Lewisville is who I think they are, they got to go to Highlander and win that game by 3 or 4 scores, because Duncanville would, DeSoto would. And if Lewisville wants to be the kind of team that is in the discussion to be competitive, to win the region and to be competitive with Duncanville in a state semifinal game, you got to go to Highlander Stadium and you got to win that game convincingly. And it's very hard to do that. Obviously, we can, have a very short list. We could play a little memory game. I can say Frisco Lone Star, and you got to name the last team that beat them, and you're going to sit there and think for a while and, and be confused, because people don't go to Highlander Stadium and win those games. Out of state team did. You got to go back, 20 years before that. So can they go in there and do that? I think they can, and I think they can make a statement. But for me, a statement is just winning by 21. You win that game by 21, 49-28, or whatever it ends up being. That is a statement made to the state of Texas. Now, if you go in there and you get to a shootout, now it puts into question that defense, the defensive performance. I know Warren Peck is a very special quarterback. He obviously introduced himself to the state of Texas this week with his performance against Flower Mound Marcus. But you go in there and you hold that really good offense to 14-21, and you get your 42 points, because you can score on Highland Park. Marcus did that. Marcus put up nice numbers against Highland Park. They just couldn't convert, and they couldn't finish drives. So I don't think Lewisville is going to have a problem getting that offensive numbers up there. It's just, can they stop it? And if you're going to have an elite level defense, you got to stop teams like Highland Park.
Yeah, if they do like you're saying they might do with Lewisville over Highland Park in a big way, then I can't see anybody else not being on board with this team throughout the way. I mean, the rest of the way, they're just they should be able to go undefeated if they get through this thing, and maybe with ease, So let's move on.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's great. Sorry about that. Let's move on to the
until they play Plano West, then they're gonna have to get a last second field goal.
That's right. Why does that always happen? That's a good question. No matter how much better they are than Plano West, it's always a nickel dimer, and we have to figure this thing out at the end. Let's go back to North Crowley, because they took care of one Arlington school. They got another one coming up, and last week we talked about how Arlington and Mesquite was a game that was going to decide kind of who we were going to kind of push in there as the 4th playoff team in their districts. Did you get any headway from the last 3 minutes in the game win for Arlington? And after you answer that question, talk to me about their limited chances probably against North Crowley.
It just made me more confused, because the very first play of the game, Mesquite lost their quarterback. And when you lose your quarterback the very first play of the game, just throw up the game plan and try to figure that out. Especially for a team like Mesquite, who has limited depth, you lose your top guy, and that really showed the heart of Mesquite, and why I think Mesquite is a really good team with number 4. So what I was hoping that we would get out of that game, we can't really get, because we don't know the injury update, and we don't know how they would have fared with their best player. But we still know that the infrastructure of Mesquite was able to push Arlington, come back after they got that early knockout, because obviously Arlington kind of got up on them, then Mesquite was able to get back in there. They just couldn't finish that. But man, North Crowley, and I get it, Sam Houston, but this is what North Crowley was not doing last year against some of these bad teams like Sam Houston. Chris Jimerson, 14 for 20, 245 yards, 4 touchdowns. Also ran the ball four times for 75 yards and a touchdown. Cornelius Warren, 8 carries for 102 yards and a touchdown. And then you could even see their depth go on from there. A kid like Ashton Sorrell, 11 carries for 69 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously a nice performance from Ashton. And he had the kind of performance where you go, okay, North Crowley, even if they have to suffer an injury or so, they got another kid who can plug in here. They've got this starting to have that depth. It's not just a one-man show with Chris Jimerson. So I think they're going to blow out Arlington. I think we're going to continue to see North Crowley. I was not a believer of North Crowley getting. I mean, I was skeptical of North Crowley. I thought that they could do it, but they had to show it to me. They had to show me a little something. And I think if they can continue this, dominance, even beating Arlington 28-35 points, that's what I want to continue to see from them. And I'm getting very excited for it. I know this is kind of a bigger topic than just this, but 3-6A is starting to look on the good side, like all of a sudden, some of these teams, who have been, I'm not saying they're going to beat North Crowley, but I'm saying they're not going to go in there and roll over. It's going to be a very competitive district from 2 to 6 right now. Weatherford Keller Central really caught my eye. LD Bell continues to catch my eye. Euless Trinity. I mean, they caught my eye against Prosper. The way they came back, almost had a chance to win that game. They went for 2 and they missed it, but had a chance to come back, even though Prosper had a couple of turnovers in that fourth quarter to get in there, to let them back in the game. And Crowley just with a dominant win. So this is a very fun district. And I think North Crowley needs that because, like we talk about with South Oak Cliff in their district, when you don't get pushed at all, that really doesn't bode well. And even if North Crowley is 2 to 3 touchdowns better than all of these teams, they're still going to push them and make them better. So I think North Crowley has to be looking at the rest of this district and going, okay, this is going to get us ready for a good playoff run as well. So I think North Crowley should beat Arlington by 28-35. And if they don't, if it's like a 1-score game like last year, then we're going to say same old North Crowley. But then again, that's going to set up in 2 weeks. Lovejoy, North Crowley. I'm very excited about that.
I'm excited about that one as well, man. Yeah, that's the first thing I thought about, which I heard you saying that North Crowley finally impressed you. I was like, if they impressed you there, when they play Lovejoy and that game gets to be great, I hope you get to that game. Is that a Friday or are you going to miss it?
That's Friday.
Is it? All right. Well, can't you just stay away from – never mind. I won't even put that thought in your head. You can't do it. Hey, it's interesting. The 3-6A is kind of like a pendulum with 9-6A. It's starting to rise up, and 9-6A is just like dropping off the map. I don't even know. I don't want to get into 9-6A quite yet because we're still talking about some 3-6A squads. You're impressed by Weatherford's win. I was impressed by Pierce's win, and those two guys face each other. Pierce put up some points and got that big W in week 1. Kind of unexpected to me. I was kind of thinking Wiley might be that squad, but talk to me about this game.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of Wiley, every year they have that one game where you just kind of have to go, what was this? And this Wiley is a team that continues to get better throughout the year. And, by the playoffs, all of a sudden they're beating Mesquite Horn. You're like, what's up with this? But, what I saw with Richardson Pierce is that they've got a couple of players. They've got a rusher that we hadn't heard of, an Andrew Casagrande. That's a great football name. They got a quarterback we haven't heard of in Presley Harper. Both having really good games. And obviously the Wiley defense, which, we kind of thought would be one of the dominant forces in 9-6A, were clearly not that. So we have Wiley, did have some offensive prowess. Obviously, Jagger Bale threw the ball for 4 touchdowns, 290 yards, and he also ran for 93 yards, but he had no other support. It was just the Jagger Bale show, and Richardson Pierce had more depth. I think Wiley will still be fine when it comes to their district, just because of the district it is. But you had Saxey impress me. I think Rowlett for a half impressed me. Lakeview Centennial was impressive. Wiley is no longer necessarily a de facto number 2 in that district. I think they're going to get pushed, and this might indicate that Wiley is not quite where they were. Remember last year, Ward, I picked Wiley to be 8th in district, and everybody got really mad at me, and I ended up being really wrong on that, which I will be really wrong on a few things. And we'll talk about, I'm sure, some of those things I've been really wrong on as in the first week as we get that immediate feedback from the teams. But I think Weatherford is probably going to take care of Richardson Pierce. But I think that was more of an anomaly about Wiley versus what we saw with Weatherford. I really think the Keller district is another one of those districts that is really trending upward. So Keller, and I guess we'll see with Keller Central because they play Plano this week. What did that game mean? Or will Plano just blow them out of the water too? And we're like, Keller Central, that's trash. And then maybe that gives a little bit of information. I shouldn't call teams trash. I'm sorry, Keller Central. You work hard. You're not trash. But the play, the margin of victory is as such. So I think I'm going to take Weatherford to win this game by 2 scores. And if Richardson Pierce can win this game, I think that definitely puts them into contention for the 4th playoff spot in 7-6A.
Yeah, that's interesting. For some reason, I thought you were going to go Pierce on this one, but what do I know? I can't ever judge you.
Very little, Ward. Very little.
Enigma. You're very much an enigma. Trinity with that great comeback. You talked about that comeback against Prosper teams in the past, maybe not Trinity teams, but you find yourself down 28-7. You lay down. You know, Summit's team laid down last year twice in the beginning. Now we'll get to them later. They've gotten rid of that mojo, it seems like, but Trinity did not. And like you said, it came down to a 2-point conversion. And they're got a home game against Heath and Rodney Webb's team coming in there. They just took a beating from Geyer, but a lot of teams are going to do that. How do you think these two teams match up?
You know, I went to this game last year, and this was the game that Heath put up like 70 on Trinity or something completely ridiculous. And I think Trinity has had this game circled, that even more than the Prosper game. I think the Prosper game in the second half showed us their heart. I think we're going to see their determination and grit against Rockwall Heath coming up. I think Trinity is going to beat Rockwall Heath and avenge that loss from last year. I think it's going to be a very close game, back and forth kind of a game, but the way Trinity plays, I think their size and what we saw against Prosper, that was a really good warm-up for Euless Trinity. Those are the kind of games you want to schedule in non-district, because Euless Trinity and Prosper, we had the Spider-Man meme with both of them pointing at each other. You know, both of them only put through the ball 18 times. Both of them ran for 300-400 yards each, and we're just pounding the ball. But, you know, Trinity showed me in this game that they've got the multiplicity of backs. You got Josh Bell, who rushed 16 times for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns. JT Harris, 12 carries for 111 yards. The one guy I thought we had an idea of Euless Trinity, he only had to carry the ball 5 times for 60 yards, and that's Buddy Leota. So Trinity's got a lot of backs now, and they got TJ Tupuo. I should know my Hawaiian pronunciations by
Where's
now.
Goss at when you need him? Goss, you there?
If you got 2 vowels, you say if you have 2 vowels, you don't say them. So it's Tupo. TJ Tupo. We'll go with that.
We'll have him on air next week to explain to you how off you were on this game.
I try to get my Hawaiian pronunciations to do well. So Trinity shows me they've got that depth. They've got that ability to have multiple people at them. Right now, Heath is struggling in depth. You know, that they got Hoover, but what else do they have? And they're a little bit banged up, I think, early. I think Trinity is going to avenge themselves and get a nice win over Rockwall Heath.
Rockwall Heath. Well, you were talking about a little earlier, but a district that's pretty impressive was 4-6A last week. Not only did Southlake put up 70, but you had Timber Creek with a dominating win over Lamar, which it says a lot about both of the districts, if you ask me. And then you had Eaton pulling off a win on the road against Braswell with Noah Lugo doing Lugo things. He threw some touchdowns, did throw 1 pick, but we can let that one go. And then to me, Byron Nelson.
And you are on a war. You are on a war against Noah Lugo's interception rate.
He's got to cut it out, but 1 is fine with me. That's fine. I just don't want it to get multiple interception games. But I was probably the most impressed with Byron Nelson just because, you know, Coach Pride said, you know, he wants to have an offensive system that works no matter what the players are, and it certainly worked last week. I mean, they have 9 returners on defense, but the offense really put up some crazy numbers.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think there's 2 different ways you can look at this. Plano was a playoff team last year. They lost their way into the playoffs. They won their first 3, lost their last 4, but they still made the playoffs. So this is a playoff team, but they have a new coach, you know, and a little bit of chaos over there, but still that's a team that they got talent. I mean, Plano has I talked to the coaches in Plano ISD, and everybody laments that Plano has the best feeder middle schools. You know, those middle schools like, you know, Schimmelfinnig and Carpenter, they're winning those games. You know, they're winning those 8th grade and 7th grade championships kind of consistently, and the other schools are, you know, struggling, you know, talent wise compared to that. But what happens when you get to the high school and the senior high school really dictates a lot. And that's kind of been a knock on Plano East for a while, is that Plano East has been pretty good in 9th grade and JVs, but then they get to varsity, they can't win. And that's changing over at Plano East. And that's one of the things that makes me smile right now is, you know, Plano East JV this week, and Plano East 9th grade teams, you know, Plano East 9th grade teams beat Wiley East like 47-6, and we're beating Rowlett's JV and freshman team like 50-10 and all kinds of great stuff. And that's the kind of building you're going to need to do. And obviously, we always talk about it here on the DFW podcast. The first year coach is always a little bit of a struggle. And Byron Nelson, they just went out there and they put their foot on their throat. And I had a buddy who was at that game, and he said Plano just looked disorganized, and they just, it's like they didn't know how to cover a guy. Byron Nelson was just sending the, you know, they don't have the receivers for years out there, but they had like the receivers for weeks out there, and they're just sending them out there. And Tom Von Grote was just finding them, and he was like, they're just wide open. I mean, it wasn't even a struggle. And that's kind of what you're talking about with Coach Pride, the system, you know, the system of knowing how to run those routes, the system of 7-on-7, and getting to play those, you know, getting those reps in 7th and 8th and 9th grade that he wants to see there, to the, you know, to where you can just put in anybody there and they're going to be used to that. And Plano looked like they hadn't seen that in a while, but it still takes an impressive team to accomplish that, because if you had a receiver who's running 4.9, 5.0 routes out there, you know, even if a Plano guy is confused, he's going to catch up with them, you know, even if he gets a little bit behind. But they have talent, they have skill, they have efficacy. And Byron Nelson said, okay, we're here for another year. But again, I think last year I had a serious doubt. Could they beat South Lake Carroll? And, you know, and I thought maybe they could. This year, I don't have that, you know, and that might take a little bit of the stress off of them, because, you know, everybody's going to look at them as, oh, they're not going to beat South Lake Carroll. That's probably the time they're most dangerous, is that, okay, you can look by us. We're just going to put our hard hats on and do the work. And Byron Nelson continues to do the work. And I think they're going to continue to do the work probably up until they have that game against South Lake Carroll in week 8 or 9 again.
Yeah. And I mean, and talking about that district, it's not a 1 through 4 deal anymore. Now it's a not that it was last year, but it's going to be a battle, as it usually is down there at the bottom, to get in that postseason spot. I'd love for you to hit on that Timber Creek team, because, and we didn't know much about Lamar, but now we learned something by the beating they just took from Timber Creek and Dozie Ezukamba.
Yeah, and I thought I knew a little bit about Arlington Lamar, because I saw him scrimmage Saxe, and I thought that Saxe was, you know, Arlington Lamar was better than Saxe, and then Saxe dang near beats Coppell, and Arlington Lamar can't even be competitive against Timber Creek. And now look at what Timber Creek is doing over there. They had four quarterbacks. You're talking about how I feel about having 2 quarterbacks out there. They had 4 quarterbacks out there throwing the ball. They had like 8 They had 8 running backs out there running the ball. That's how deep they were. And Timber Creek, with that depth, they were able to just, you know, throw their defense at them. Obviously, their defense was very good, enabling them to stop that. And you mentioned this, Ward, and it's a really good point. And I had a chance to look at the spreadsheet and say, wow, Ward is actually right about something. Timber Creek is that team that if they can make the playoffs, it completely changes the mechanism of who goes to Division I and Division II, because they'll be a Division I team. They're the biggest school in this district. And I think they're finally flexing some of that depth. So if they get into the playoffs, if Northwest Eaton or Keller make the playoffs, then Carroll is going to go Division II. So Carroll is kind of looking at Timber Creek and their resurgence and going, okay, you know, we're kind of okay with that.
Get a win or two, buddy. Get a win or two.
You know, we don't mind necessarily. We don't mind avoiding some of this Division I stuff. Obviously, if Eaton and Keller both make the playoffs, Carroll also stays D2. But it's when you have a Fossil Ridge come in there, or a Keller Central. I'm not worried about Keller Central. And after Fossil Ridge lost to Flower Mound, I'm not necessarily worried about Fossil Ridge. I'm sure you don't like the fact that I just kind of completely diminished what a Flower Mound win that was. But if either of those teams sneak into the playoffs, then all of a sudden South Lake Carroll is a Division I. So I'm sure Riley Dodge is watching that dynamic with that top 4. You know, maybe he feels good that we're more likely to be Division II than Division I right now. But Timber Creek, if they're able to get in there, it completely upsets the dynamics of this district. And who would they go? Whose expense would they take to do it? Would it be Northwest Eaton? Would it be Keller, a team that we thought would make the playoffs? Because Keller looked good. Of all those teams we're talking about right now, Northwest Eaton's the one I'm looking at kind of going, yeah, you know, you only beat Denton Braswell by 6. You know, I'm not very impressed with that. So Northwest Eaton, I'm a little skeptical on them right now. You know, I heard a lot of good things about them on 7-on-7, and I kind of boosted them up. But now, you know, you got to take care of a first-year coach in Denton Braswell and take care of things with that and show, you know, that's what we get. That's that whole debate I was getting into earlier with Frisco Reedy. I need the style points, and they didn't give style points. They were lucky to win that game. And if you're barely beating a 6th or 7th place team in 5-6A, either Denton Braswell is going to be way better than we thought, which they might be, and time will tell with that, or you're not as good as you thought you were, and that's where that is trending right now.
5-6A is kind of trending in the middle. They're not the most elite district out there besides 11-6A anymore, because they've had some struggles. So one team that didn't struggle was Geyer. We talked about them beating Heath, and our game of the week is them against Aledo on Friday night. Aledo's on their Getting My Licks Back tour. They took care of Paris Episcopal. Now they want to go up there to Geyer and take care of things up there. Can they do that? And will they do that? Let's do 2 questions in the same answer.
Well, can they? Obviously, we could talk about what they can do. In looking at point margins, and I can't do this for every game, and I wish I could, just because of stat availability. But that Denton Geyer game, when you start to dig into it a little bit, that was a 14-14 game at halftime, and then Denton Geyer, put it away in the second half, very much like Plano East and Rowlett. That was a game that Denton Geyer, or that Plano East, was up on, it was a back and forth game, but finally they made the defensive adjustment, shut them down, and the offense kept going. And that was very much what happened with the Denton Geyer. I'm always going to worry, you don't have Plano East on your run sheet, but I'm going to talk about them. I will make it.
It sure is coming back to Plano East a lot, more than usual this time. We're only about 10 minutes into this tip. This is going to be a doozy. Get Tony Benedetto out here to listen to this. Every game goes back to him.
It's always going to go back. We're going to be talking about Gunter and Walnut Grove here as my bonus game. I'll find a way to make it about Plano East. And then I look at that Aledo and Parish Episcopal game, and you got Aledo who got out so quickly. They started to get the subs in because they didn't want to show up anybody, and that's when Parish Episcopal started to get back into the game. It's kind of the same thing with Lovejoy and College Station, that the ending margin of victory is not necessarily reflective of how dominant their performance was. So to me, I think Aledo, if they are pushed for 48 minutes, that's really their goal here. And I think for 48 minutes, they're a better team than Denton Geyer across the board. So I think Denton Geyer is going to need a couple of turnovers, going to need a couple of things to go there to break their way, maybe a kickoff return, maybe our guy Eli Bowen, gets in there and does something on the defensive side of the ball. But all I heard about that Aledo Parish Episcopal game was how silly they made a very good Parish Episcopal team look. Just their top guys were just way better, and we knew that they're going to have that. They have all the D1 talent across the board, and there's going to be some questions. When Denton Geyer's got to replace a quarterback, he made a good first showing, but I like the fact you got Haas Haney. You got the kid who is experienced, and you got Hawk Patrick Jones and all those kids. I think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think Aledo wins a 1-2 score game.
Yeah, and Haas Haney's always going to do the running thing. His speed is still, in my mind, still underrated. I mean, he's just so fast. So I agree with you on that one. I think they're going to come up there and take it. Let's talk about Prosper and Saxe, because Saxe put up a really solid effort against Capel. They almost beat them. They only lost by 3 points. They got 41. And you weren't impressed by them too much during the scrimmage, but that game had to impress you. And now they're going against the Prosper team that the Eagles know no lead is too safe, even if they are at home.
Well, I think we have our early contender for the city I've made the most mad so far. I'm starting to see some fake accounts from Prosper popping up. I've got the Prosper Barstool, some other Prosper people are just like, you hate us, Diggs. Why can't you just admit it? And it's coming from different accounts. Like, oh, we got one kid who's mad at me, and he's going to create all these different accounts to let me know about it. I like Prosper. Just to be clear, I like Prosper. I think they're just not as good as they've been in the past, and that's a testament to how good they have been in the past. That even a team that might only make the playoffs and go 1 or 2 deep, that's disappointing to the community, because they've gotten to the point where they're expecting to continue to get better every single year, going 3, 4, 5 deep, depending on the season. And they consider that they're kind of, how dare you doubt against us? What have we done to prove that? Well, I mean, you had 2 fumbles in the fourth quarter and almost let Trinity beat you. So that's what you did. But I really like, and I get so frustrated with coaches who don't play to their strengths. It's like we're a spread offense. We're going to run the ball. Prosper has almost completely changed their offense. offense to just run the ball. Nathan Tenbarge had a fantastic game, very efficient in his throwing, but they ran the ball. And, they got behind that big offensive line, which is the best part of their team, and they continued to pound it, and they never got off of that. Obviously, they got to make sure they can hold on to the ball, eliminate the turnovers. And really, I think that Saxe's only chance to win this game is if Prosper kind of self-destructs with another 2 or 3 turnovers. Brendan George had a heck of a game, Ward, for Saxe. I mean, I didn't see that coming against Coppell, and I think it kind of exposed Coppell very early that Coppell just doesn't have a running game, and they don't have a good defense right now. And, they were expected to have a really good secondary, but when they had Saxe's bigs against Coppell's bigs, it kind of faltered. The second level had to make a lot of stops for Coppell in that game. So I think Prosper will be a favorite of this game. This is one of those games where I'm very interested in the style points and the yardage, because if Saxe can be competitive in this game, they win. If Prosper wins 35-28 or something, you may see Saxe make the top 25 pretty soon, because even with 2 losses, I'll be impressed by those losses in such a way to where I'm like, hey, they've caught my attention. And if Prosper blows them out of the water, then, okay, might need to be worried about Coppell a little bit. But I think Saxe is going to play very competitively, because Prosper, I think we saw the weakness in their depth against Euless Trinity was their defense doesn't have the depth it's had in the past. And 48 minutes with Euless Trinity's offensive line, those big guys wearing down on them, It took its toll.
Yeah. That will do that to you. I can guarantee it. And I have never even faced it myself, but I can just look at them and be like, okay, I got to go 4 quarters of this. It's not going to be a good night. All right, let's talk about Allen's regular visit from a Houston team. This time it's going to be CE King. Like they came up last year and just didn't really compete with them at all. This year, on paper, it should be similar. Excuse me as I cough again. Because CE King graduated 35 seniors. I mean, they graduated a lot, but this is also a team that made it to as far as they've ever been to a regional final last year. And they do have a very speedy receiver, Ray J. Daly, that's back, and they just finished crushing Crosby. Now Crosby's not the same team they were that went to the COVID state championship game to get beat by Aledo, but they still were a quality team, and they took care of them very easily. They're coming up here. You made a comment to me, and I want you to talk about this. And I don't want to steal your comment, but we're talking about Allen and how their fans maybe are they going to be happy with just being a good team?
A couple elements I really want to talk about with this game, and I'm not a Houston guy, Ward. So
right.
if I butcher any of this stuff, you're going to have to correct me, because I know you know way more about this. But that district over there, that 21-6A, is a really, really good district. Yeah. It's kind of like 5-6A when 5-6A has been good the last couple of years. Obviously, you got a North Shore, you got a Tascasita, and Tascasita is one of the few teams that have come down and beaten Allen at their own game. Summer Creek, I don't know much about them, but I know they're pretty good. And
all 4 of those teams the last 2 years have gone at least 3 rounds deep. So I mean, that tells you that it's quality. The teams that make the postseason are probably as good as any team you'll face.
And they're all beating each other. It's like they're only knocking out each other in the playoffs when they start to have to face each other. And then CE King, you're not very impressed at that win, but I mean, it's like they only beat this Crosby team by 30 points or whatever it was. Yeah. Obviously, they did what they're supposed to do, and that gets back to the style points. Then you have Allen, who you're just looking at like, who is this Allen team? What do they have that makes you a little bit optimistic about their success? And really, it's very limited. I mean, you have Brady Bricker, 5 for 17 with 41 yards. I know he did rush for a 60-yard touchdown run, which was their only score. But after that, his other 6 runs were next to nothing. Obviously, trying to figure out that running game. I don't see Sibley in the rushing statistics, so maybe he's out or whatever the case may be with that. I think CE King is going to win this game, short of a monumental meltdown on their part. Right? If they come into Allen and they fumble 4 or 5 times or throw a couple of interceptions, I think that they're going to win that game. And you kind of set me up with this. when you go read Allen Twitter, which is a very, very sad place to be right now, you have to kind of check your mental health at the door when you're going in there because you're going to shed a few tears. In the past, when they've lost, it's coaching, the coaching is horrible, or this or that kid, or whatever. And now it's all like, DeSoto's just a really good team. Those kids really tried hard. It's not that grit and fire that you're used to from Allen. It's just kind of this resignation of, well, they're just better than us. What can you do? We tried hard. We gave it a good college effort. And I don't see that anger just about anywhere. I'm talking, I got buddies at the Balding Eagle Booster Club over there. They're not texting me right now. They're just kind of like, well, it just is what it is. And to me, that states that I think Allen is not set up, but it's not like they're just waiting for a class, oh, we got a really good freshman class, so we're going to kind of, I think Allen is kind of resigning themselves to be just really good for a while. Obviously, when you have 7,000 students in your school that you can pick from, you're going to be okay, but you're not going to be elite. And I think DeSoto showed them that they're not going to be elite. They're going to be in that middle range. They're going to be like a Coppell or Prosper or one of those teams. But CE King in that district, they have to be elite because they're going to play 3 elite teams that it's very likely that a team is going to come out of there is going to be here in Arlington again, whatever it is. If it's a Tascasita or North Shore, you're going to see one of those big guys playing in Arlington. And CE King is up for the challenge, and I like that about their coach. I don't even know who's their coach. Ward, do you know their coach's name?
The second-year coach, Coach Woods. It used to be one of my main guys there, but he went up to the AD. But yeah, Coach Woods is in there now, and that's what was most surprising about last year's first-year coach. You would never predict a first-year coach to go to as far as they've ever gone. And granted, it's a newer school, but made it all the way to the regional final. And the Allen fans that don't, that just come out and expect to see Allen be like Allen, and they see a team coming up from Houston and say, we beat all these Houston teams. Hell, we beat this team by 30 last year, and they finished 4th in their district. Oh, they're not going to be anything we have to worry about. Now, if it happens, because I was going to say it myself, that I think King wins this game, and I think they win by 10 points. But if an Allen fan sees that and they haven't done their research, they're going to be like, all right, it's one thing to say this about DeSoto. They're just an elite team. Who are these guys that came up here and beat us? All right, something's got to be done. I would think they would do something like that. Now, if they end up being reserved like you said they were after this past week, then that does address a different issue altogether.
Yeah, it's just kind of that sad piano music, like, oh, well, I guess we're not going to be that good for a while, instead of that fire that you've seen from the Allen faithful in the past. But look at us, Ward. We're both on Team Houston. We weren't on Team Houston Yates, but we're
no. I couldn't be on Houston Yates. Oh, brother. Hey, let's talk about, you already talked a lot about McKinney, but let's talk about the Berkner side of this McKinney-Berkner game.
I have one more question about that.
Sure.
Do you have somebody at the King game, or are you going to double dip that thing?
We're still making out the schedule, but it's a very good chance we'll be at that game for sure.
But you might only see the highlights at 10 p.m.
Yeah. Hey, I went to the game. I went to the game last year to double dip, and Houston fans never saw a play of that game because I wasn't going to show them get stomped out. So if it happens the same way to Allen wise, you won't know if I went there or not because I won't show it. I'll go somewhere else. All right,
go down to Houston, rent a hotel so you can watch TV down there.
Exactly. There you go. Hey, tell me about this Berkner team. Can they bounce back from the 1-point loss where their kicking game let them down, as well as their offense that didn't score a lot of points?
Their offense let them down. Their defense let them down. Their special teams let them down. Their coaching let them down.
That's right. The special teams did let them down because there's a fake punt in that game that gave them a first down and led to their first touchdown. Then they missed the extra point and the 20-yard field goal to win it. But now they got a banged-up McKinney team coming to town.
They do, and that's a tough draw for them. Obviously, Coach Bryant and Coach Shavers know each other, and I think that's why that game was scheduled. And I remember talking to Coach Bryant last year. We were up at the press box for Temple and McKinney, and I asked him, I was like, why'd you schedule this game? It's kind of dumb. You're going to lose by 5 touchdowns against McKinney. This was last year. He's like, well, that's my guy, Shavers. And we got to get better. And I think he started to know that this was coming in the pipeline, and he wanted to see what his team had against, a higher elite team to get them ready to see, can they play a team like Highland Park, and can they beat a team like Lake Highlands? So I finally got a little bit of intel. I talked to my friends at Berkner. QB1 was not in the game, and he was injured, but it was just a minor injury. One of those things. If it was a district game, playoff game, probably goes. But right now, it wasn't worth it. They're thinking big, which is that's a coaching win as far as that goes. And then Damian Crow, the player that you kind of expected to go in there, he only touched the ball 4 times. They're not really wanting to overexert him. They want to see how he goes. He's only just a sophomore, so there's still a lot of upside for him. So we did not see our best version of Berkner, and still they got better. I mean, last year that game was 27-0, if I remember right, and this year it was 14-13 with a missed extra point and this and that, and a couple of things you could point to without their best quarterback. So obviously Berkner, if this game was in week 8, week 9, they probably would have won that game against Wiley East. And that doesn't say Wiley East doesn't get better. Maybe Wiley East does get better, but Wiley East is one of those teams that has 2 quarterbacks, and we don't like that here at the DFW podcast. You got 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. You're basically playing 11 on 10. Just go on out the door for me as far as that goes. We need to have a coach come on here and explain to me. I put that challenge out there on Twitter. I was like, I want somebody to explain why, I'm 5 years old, why having 2 quarterbacks is a good thing. Because the only thing I can think of is that you have 2 really good players and you just want to get them both time. But when's the last time that you've ever seen a state champion rotate quarterbacks, Ward?
I haven't seen it in a while.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen at all. So I think that, if you're setting yourself up for we got 2 guys, we'll just rotate and we're not expecting to be a state champion, it doesn't really tell me that you're being serious about this. And maybe if a coach can come in here and I heard the Lancaster.
You'll hear what Coach Paul said. He wants to get them both looks because they're both worthy of college scholarships, and he feels like he owes it to the family.
Yeah, and I hear that, but again, what did Lancaster do? They underachieved in the playoffs. So it's like, what are you really doing when that comes? Because you might have both of them able to play at the college level, but I mean, are you trying to win football games? You're trying to get your kids scholarships. I don't understand it. Maybe the better answer is, well, I'm trying to help my kids get scholarships, and maybe that's a sacrifice he's willing to make. And if so, I mean, there's something honorable about that, I guess, at one hand. But on the other hand, is it fair to your team? That the team wants a ring. And it might be why you might see some people transfer out because they want to go to a place where they can compete for a ring and have a chance to win because. Not everybody's going to get to play college, but if you get a ring, even if you're the 3rd string stepper, you get that ring on your finger there, Ward. So
it's another mind. I mean, there's the other mindset where they transfer out because they want to get playing time. They don't feel like they're being showcased. So it depends on what the mind of the player is and the coach.
We've gone from Lancaster. I got to talk about Plano East at this point. I'm not going to talk about Plano East. I do think that McKinney should beat Berkner by 2 or 3 scores, even with that thing. But I do think that Berkner is going to get better than they were last year in this game, and I think they'll be more competitive. And I think you'll see that gap close, which kind of highlights that Berkner is getting better. And I'll be interested to see how QB1 does against McKinney. But that's a tough draw. I mean, if he's even a little bit banged up, maybe hold him out for McKinney as well, just because that defensive line, if you get after him, if he takes a sack, that could re-exacerbate an injury right there.
Exactly. All right. How about Lake Highlands? Yeah, you had trouble with them all summer long, but now that Berkner's, you've kind of, I don't even know. I haven't got a chance to see the rankings. Has Lake Highlands gone over Berkner in your rankings? Or
they have gone over Berkner. Okay. I fired Berkner. I give you one chance, and if you let me down, if you're like Summit, I'll give you a big hug, and we'll get some videos out there, and you can share them, and we'll be all happy. But you let me down, and I will cut you real quick. That's just like you will do on a bad segment. If you got a 60-3 game, you're out of there.
You'll cut you. See,
you'll put some B-reel out there or something to deal with that. But Lake Highlands, they had that kind of dominant game. It was only 14-0 at halftime, and they kind of mess around with Lake Highland or Poteet in the past. But they're just consistent. Trip Holly, he didn't have to do too much. Deontay Dean, 20 carries, 240 yards, and 2 touchdowns. when you got that kind of, player who can just take the ball and constantly get you 10 to 20 yards and get you those chunk plays, you don't need to show what you got with Trip Hawley. And obviously Trip Hawley's got more than we saw. He didn't make any mistakes, and that was a big part of that game. But it was a very messy game. Mesquite Poteet had 6 turnovers. You had Lake Highlands with 4 turnovers, including muffed punt and 3 lost fumbles. So if you can't hold on to the ball, that's a big problem. If you would have cleaned up those 4 turnovers, then Lake Highlands probably wins that game, 49-7. And we're going to talk about that, and I will give a mulligan for a first week over turnover thing, and Lake Highlands had that, and they still won the game. It's not very often, Ward, that you can say you had 4 turnovers in a game and you still won by 28 and you're disappointed. Right. So I'm going to give Lake Highlands the benefit of the doubt. And now we're going to talk about your Flower Mound Jaguars. And you tell me what you know about Jake Watson, because that kid lit up the score sheet.
He came out of nowhere, right? I mean, they told me that the 10th grade and 11th grade guys that were coming up we're supposed to do something at Flower Mound, maybe not win them a district title, but come on the come ups. Obviously, we talk ad nauseum about Drew Evers, but talk about Watson and the game he had, and can he keep it up against Lake Highlands?
I mean, he had 22 for 32 for 224 yards, 4 touchdowns, more importantly, no turnovers. And then he rushed the ball 12 times for 61 yards and a touchdown. One of the things that their quarterback last year hadn't done until Plano East, I was able to get Plano East logically into that, is run the football. And Jake Watson showed that he could do it and also throw the ball and run the ball. But what really kind of worries me is that the fact that if he's your leading receiver, if he wasn't the leading receiver, if he was the leading rusher, that's a little bit concerning about it. That if you can stop him, you can shut down that team. Obviously, I like the receivers. Jason Welch, 6 receptions for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they've always going to have that good receiving depth. But I'm a little bit nervous that Peyton Stadler was the running back who he only had 8 carries for 32 yards, and obviously Flower Mound, they want to throw the ball 30 or 40 times, and they want to use their passing game to basically be their running game. Those little quick outs to the sideline and make a big play. So I don't think that's sustainable in 6-6A. So, if it is, then he's going to probably win offensive MVP or something in 6-6A. So it'll be fascinating to see Lake Highlands and Flower Mound, because you have Flower Mound. And one thing I've always said about Flower Mound is they're probably the best coach team in 6-6A consistently. They get more out of their team than anybody else does. And then you have Lake Highlands, who they got the first-year coach, so they got to deal with that. And their very first game, they had 4 turnovers, but they're still learning and still working out their offensive system, and we didn't see everything they had. So if Flower Mound plays that perfect game and Lake Highlands hasn't gotten better, I think we're going to see Flower Mound win that game. But it's going to take something like the Lake Highlands 2, 3, 4 turnovers to win that game. I think Lake Highlands at their best and Flower Mound at their best. Lake Highlands is 2 scores better.
All righty. What about Rockwall and Jesuit? These 2 teams play. I feel like they play almost every year. Sometimes they get in there in the playoffs as well. I remember when I first got here, they had a great playoff game out in Rockwall, but we saw what Rockwall did together to the point where I had to leave at halftime. It was getting out of hand. Can Jesuit give them a little bit more of a game than Cedar Hill did?
I think they can, just because of the structure of their team, but I think the score might end up being similar. You got Charlie Peters, who is a very good, competent quarterback. He went 28 for 43 for 255 yards and 2 touchdowns. They got a decent running back in Zane Williams, who went 17 carries for 112 yards and 2 touchdowns. But their defense, the knock on Jesuit in the past has been that defense. We've seen Jesuit play some of those 50 to 40 games to try to win those games, and they let Hebron basically score at will, and Hebron was able to turn those turnovers into points. If Jesuit's going to go give Rockwall 3 or 4 turnovers, it's going to get uglier than the Cedar Hill game. But I think if they play a clean game, you're probably still going to see Rockwall win that game by 3 or 4 scores. It's just going to take them the whole 48 minutes to get there. It's not going to be just an instant thing and play out. Rockwall's going to have to really battle for that, because Jesuit's going to get their points. But I think Rockwall's going to win maybe a 56-28 kind of a game. I think Jesuit might score late to even make it a little bit of a better window dressing. But if Jesuit is going to have turned the ball over, over. We saw Rockwall had a very aggressive defense and a much better, more disciplined defense than I was expecting. So you can't play that game against Rockwall. So I think Rockwall is a favorite either way. I came away, I got to use our new feature on our website, Ward. I got to put that Rockwall is trending up. I'm very excited about saying they're trending up. But at the same time, it's frustrating for Rockwall that, you can be trending up and you're still looking at Duncanville and DeSoto, second or fourth round, depending on how it shakes out there. So they are trending up, but I don't know if they're quite at the Duncanville level. But I've seen some of their fans are saying, bring on Duncanville, and I like that bravado.
Wow. Hey, and a quick shout out to Kai Helton. That was probably one of the best catches I've seen. Well, obviously the best catch I've seen this year, but probably the best one I've seen in a couple of years. He used one arm and 1 foot to get in there for that touchdown. It's a pretty solid catch. Let's move on to Arlington Martin, Cedar Hill. Man, I don't, even if Martin wanted to, I don't think they could blow him out like Rockwall did, because I just don't think they have that kind of offensive power on that team. But they did stick with Lake Travis. And I was a little nervous about that Lake Travis game. I thought they had a chance to maybe get rolled in that thing. It was only a 7-point game, and their defense really stood up. They're taking on a Cedar Hill team that was kind of rocked, as we just talked about. I think you're going to tell me Martin's going to win, because I'm going to tell you that. But how much do you think that's going to be?
I don't think they're going to blow them out, but I think they're going to shut them out because that's what I got out of that defensive performance. They did shut out Lake Travis for 3 quarters, but obviously in the fourth quarter at home, Lake Travis was finally able to break through. I can't see Cedar Hill with the offense that we saw that was very disorganized and lackadaisical at times and had a hard time getting pushed, scoring a full kind of a drive against Arlington Martin at all. I mean, it's going to be something like it has to be a short field or a muffed punt or something. I think we're going to see Arlington Martin maybe win a 21-0 game on Cedar Hill.
Okay. Well, a team you did see get blown out, Rowlett, that takes us back to Plano East, is taking on a North 40 team that actually was one of our 50 burger teams from last week, as they took down the White House 55-33. What do you think about this game coming up?
Well, Ward, I'm going to give you a little bit of inside information. You and I, let's get a little closer to the camera. Nobody else can hear this, so
hear what you're saying. Give it to me.
This me and you. I've got some friends out in East Texas. I do some wrestling podcasts. The Net SN people got friends out there, and they let me know the day of that White House and North Forney game, the star running back and the star cornerback got in a fight at lunch, and both had to be suspended. And they were changing the game plan on the way on the bus and just trying to figure it out. And North Forney took complete advantage of it. I don't know if that really happened. That's just what my friends out in East Texas tell me. I'm not a White House sort of guy. I know Patrick Mahomes went there. That's about all I can tell you about White House. But that was a completely unexpected result. So the fact that there's a reason for that, and for all I know, the running back, was there, and first RB1 was there and CB1 was there, and people are just telling tall tales to make themselves feel better about that. Maybe a running back and cornerback did get in a fight, but it's like running back 6 and quarterback 8, and I'm just saying, that's what I hear. And looking at the stats, I think, but what that doesn't really change the fact is that White House let North Forney score 55 points on them. So obviously that's one cornerback ain't going to change that. But White House they got to win the shootout. So I mean, that's kind of how they played the football game. You look at that Lovejoy game last year, and Crandall, and some of the other times that they played the DFW area teams, they got to win shootouts. So obviously not having all of their offensive firepower was a little bit telling as far as that goes. Rowlett, I know I'm giving Plano East a lot of credit when I say this. Rowlett was not a bad team. Rowlett suffered from depth. Their front 22 were good, but they started getting cramps and they started getting deteriorated, and they lost a couple of players. I think Rowlett's going to bounce back and beat North Forney. I think their defense is going to be a lot better and a lot deeper than a White House 5A Division II team. I think Rowlett will bounce back in this game. It'll be a hard fought game, but I think Rowlett will win a 28-21 kind of a game over North Forney.
Okay. Well, sticking out to East Texas there, or East Texas-ish, close to East Texas, East North Texas, let's call it that. Royce City's taking on the Colony, and The Colony had what we like to call a good loss because they really played Red Oak tough. And could they change that good loss into a good win against Roy City?
You know, we talked. This is like our theme is that point differential. And last year, Roy City got on our radar early by beating Grand Prairie by like 50.
Yeah.
You know, they put up one of those early 50 burgers, or maybe a high 40 burger against Grand Prairie. And now that margin got a little bit closer this year because they lost Sam Mitchum and some of the big players that they've had in the past. And Grand Prairie is probably getting a little bit better. And then you've got Red Oak and the Colony. The Colony probably should have beat Red Oak. And the Colony is a team that a lot of people are speaking of as watch out for them. They got Carson Cox, threw for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. And running the ball, they got multiple players over there who can run the ball. Harold Gibson, Carson Cox, and Kendrick McLeodin all had really good, 9, 10, and 12 carries for 70 to 80 yards, depending on which player we're talking about. So the Colony had a very good opportunity to win that game, but they had 2 turnovers, and Red Oak played a much cleaner game. If you clear out those turnovers, I think the Colony could have upset Red Oak, and that puts the Colony in that discussion in that district with Just Northwest to be that 4th place team in that district. So I think the Colony is looking to get better each and every week. But at the end of the day, I think Royce City is just going to have a little bit more depth in them, but I think it's going to be a really competitive game. I think Royce City maybe wins a 24-21 kind of a game, but I think that's going to speak to the Colony. You're going to have to watch out for them in that district.
2 good losses, and you're predicting for them. 2 good losses in a row.
You can get 5 good losses. I'll still keep you number 1 depending
that's
on
true.
what it is. South Grand Prairie.
South Grand Prairie example is what we were calling here.
Right.
South Grand Prairie factor. Hey, let's talk about the game that I'm interested in. A legend was born out in Mesquite Horn and at quarterback, Legend Bay, and he's got those Arlington Bowie Volunteers coming out. That looks on paper, that looks like a very intriguing matchup. But the fact that it's at Hamby may tip the scales over there and may tip them big that way. But what do you think about this game? It looks on paper to be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, you got 2 teams that are getting better. Arlington Bowie had that very heartbreaking loss to Little Elm last year. They were able to bounce back and take care of business. You got Tavares Duckett and Darian Bowers, the 2-headed monster over there. Larry Nichols is at quarterback, and he can run the ball as well. They're all capable of scoring. They have a really good defense. Just the way this matches up, though, I think Mesquite Horn has just too many athletes, on both sides of the ball. I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I think Mesquite Horn, might win like a 42-28 kind of a game. And it really kind of depends on if Arlington Bowie can keep up in a shootout. If Arlington Bowie can't keep up in a shootout, then I think that you might see the margin grow even bigger. But you talked about the legend of Legend Bay. When we did our district breakdown earlier this year, we mentioned him as the next big thing at Frisco Lone Star. And then he ended up transferring over to Mesquite Horn in the offseason and obviously stepped right back in. And now you got 3, Mesquite Horn was one of those teams that were going to have 2 quarterbacks kind of rotating in and out. Now they got 3 quarterbacks, but you're going to see Legend Bay be the guy, and the other players are going to come in at running back and wide receiver and wherever they can fit in. And that's the kind of attitude I like, instead of worrying about necessarily get on film, how can I help this team out? And I think coaches will definitely embrace that mindset, just like they will, getting the tape as well, the Coach Paul theory, if you will. But I think we're going to see Mesquite Horn win this game pretty handily. I think Mesquite Horn is one of those teams. I put them on the uptrend line, and a statement victory over a team like Arlington Bowie will definitely catch my attention.
Yeah. Well, we moved to 11-6A, and it's the start of Duncanville having to take on Florida teams since they won't see anybody here that really wants to play them. So talk about them playing against Rutledge. You got to get Colin Simmons going there if he wants to get 40 sacks. He got 0 in game 1, so he needs to, these next 2 Florida games, he needs to get 5 in each of them.
Well, good news about Rockledge is that they don't appear to be very good. At least from what I could ascertain about them, they're ranked 30th according to one power poll in Florida. And that's just in their region, and they're not even in the top region. They lost to Seminole last week, so it's not a team that is coming down. They're coming out here for the road trip. They're not coming out here to be an IMG academy. We want to play the best in the nation, kind of a thing. I think they just got the allure of playing Duncanville. They're like, yeah, why not? Let's go out there and see what we got. I think Duncanville is going to just name their score against them, and we're going to have to see a lot of game management. But you talked about 50 burgers. I think we're going to see a 50 burger on this team. This is not one of the St. Francis academies or whatever that we've seen in the past. It's just kind of a good Florida team. It would be like if Duncanville played, Saxe, a good team, a team that, can compete for a playoff spot, but shouldn't be playing Duncanville.
Well, another 11-6A team that probably should be playing somebody from Florida. Somebody's got the off week, and then you look over in 3-5A, and there's a Denton Ryan team that has an off week, and DeSoto has an off week. How does those things happen? I mean, I know there's several different things where maybe there's beef between coaches. Maybe you didn't know the other team didn't have a game. But, man, when you have let's just say Monday he looks at the schedule and says, oh, Denton Ryan's not playing, and Denton Ryan says DeSoto. Could they schedule a game at the last second? Or
Sure. I'm hoping by the time that this thing gets put out for podcasting, that we may have to have a little disclaimer saying there's a segment in here that didn't make sense anymore. The coaches did the right thing and scheduled this game between DeSoto and Denton Ryan. We apologize. This is what Diggs, this is why Diggs was wrong. And I hope that's correct, because I think we're only going to benefit if we got to see a DeSoto Denton Ryan game. I don't understand why they're not playing it. To be, and it didn't really even hit my mind, so maybe it hasn't hit the coach's mind, like, oh yeah, maybe we could do something like this. Obviously, if you can schedule a playoff game in 1 week, you got both their stadium. Well, Denton's a little bit harder because they share with Collins, but obviously DeSoto is going to be empty. So there's only a couple of arguments I can think of. Well, we don't want to play a 6A team, they got more enrollment than us. Well, then why are you playing New Braunfels? And that why'd you play a 6A team there? The only logical thing I can think of is that Denton Ryan doesn't want to play this game. And Denton Ryan last year was scheduled against an Arkansas team, and that game got rained out. And I guess they felt like, well, let's just get ready for district. But again, Ward, why does every other team in the state of Texas play 10 games if it's not a good thing? Why do we cut these games out for whatever dumb reason we have in our head? We don't want to lose bad. I mean, it's only going to make them better. Are they going to just go ahead and forfeit to Aledo when they play Aledo because they don't want to lose bad or whatever the case may be? If they get to play Lake Belton in the playoffs, or they're just going to be like, oh, we're just going to hand in our paperwork and say it's been a great year. If we're hashtag still Ryan, they need to be playing DeSoto, because in the past they've been the team that's been having a hard time finding teams to play them. That's why they had to play a team like New Braunfels. This is kind of the first time that Denton Ryan has been a little bit down over the last couple of years. So I'm sure 2 years ago when they were looking at filling out the schedule, nobody did want to play them. They need to be playing DeSoto. They are depriving their team out of 1/10 of the greatest sport in the state of Texas for whatever dumb reason they have to not schedule this game. Playing DeSoto is only going to make you better. It's only going to get you more ready for that playoff run. It's only going to make that very young team more experienced, because at the end of the day, once you play DeSoto, you're not going to see a team faster this year. You're not going to see a team bigger this year, and everything else is going to slow down because you've seen this and you competed against this. I am shocked that this game is not happening. And I hope for whatever reason it was just an oversight, and all of a sudden they wake up on Monday and realize, hey, this is great. I want to play this game. But what are we going to start doing? Is Denton Ryan just going to start not scheduling non-district games because they don't want to deal with it? They just want to only play the games that count. I mean, why not schedule this game? I'm perplexed by it.
Yeah. And if you ask every kid in the locker room, I guarantee you they want to play the game. Nobody wants to just not have their full 10 games. So I don't know. Maybe something will happen this week, but I seriously doubt it. We'll see, though. Mansfield is taking on Mansfield Summit you know how Summit started last year, and Mansfield's coach, Coach George, told me that their Tigers were one of their better teams. Was one of the best Tigers teams they've had. They probably he could name like 2 or 3 others, and they just got hit with some injuries in the playoffs. But they're ready to take on Summit again, and I can't imagine that's going to be another thumping by Mansfield like they did last year. This game's got to be closer, and maybe even tip the scales over in Summit's way.
I'm going to take Mansfield Summit in this game. I mean, this Mansfield Summit team defensively looks like they are for real. I mean, the way they were able to shut down Lake Ridge, and Lake Ridge, I fumbled over his name last week. Kenan Miller is the 3rd-year starter. As a freshman, he was out there playing and really kind of getting our attention. And he's still got 1 more year. He's going to be like Parker Polk. We're just going to be growing old with Kenan Miller over there. But Mansfield Summit just has so much talent, and some of the players like Jordan Hubbard and a couple others didn't even really get in the game as much as you would have thought. It was just kind of they had 3 quarterbacks out there playing, and like seven kids run the ball. And it's very much like Lewisville. They were just able to dominate. They didn't have to have impressive numbers because the defense was so good in this game. And that game against Waco Midway is not a world beater kind of a team. They're a good team, a middle of the road team. But Mansfield struggled stopping them. And that was a game that Midway, if I remember seeing my updates correct, was down a good chunk of that game. They came back in the 4th quarter and was able to win that game. So if they're giving up 30 points to a team like Waco Midway, Summit's going to be able to name their score against them. And I think Summit is going to have a way better defense than Midway is going to have. So I think Mansfield Summit's going to win a 28-13 kind of a game, maybe even 35-13.
I'll probably be at that game. I think as of now, I got myself scheduled to go down to Newsom there. I got to wear the
nice to get to schedule yourself, huh?
Yeah, I sure did a poor job of it last week, as I gave myself 3 games outdoors, and I finally get indoors. I'm like, oh, this is pretty sweet. Maybe I should have shot Frisco Memorial against Lebanon Trail or whoever was playing in the Star. So give me something quick on the Skyline Lakeview Centennial game before we move on to 5A.
When I think of Skyline in a loss impressed me against Lancaster. And the reports I'm hearing back from them were that they were a legitimate team. And they're kind of getting back to the Skyline that we were thinking of. And Lakeview Centennial had a nice game. I think they played one of the Frisco schools. And they played they're above what I was expecting out of them. I have a mental block, so I'm gonna have to look up who they played. They played
Memorial, yeah,
and they won that game 28-7. So a very dominant sort of a game. I think Skyline is going to win this game. I think I'm a believer in what I saw. So I think this is a fascinating game because one of these 2 teams is a little bit better than we thought. And it's like kind of an elimination battle. Which one's it going to be? It's going to be Skyline or Lakeview Centennial. If Lakeview Centennial can beat Skyline, now I'm thinking about them in the 4th spot potentially in District 9-6A as much parity-driven district as that is.
Yeah, I think that 9-6A, year 1 through 4, if anybody pays attention to the dump, I think that thing's going to change like weekly because you never know what's going to happen over in there. Let's move down to 5A. We got Centennial playing Frisco. Centennial's first game was very successful as they battled for, I believe they battled for a boot down there. They battled for the boot and got it. And it was their first game without Philip Hamilton as quarterback, as he graduated, not ever, but in the last couple of years. But talk about them playing Frisco High. When I first got here, the Raccoons were known as just run, and that's it. Kind of remind me Trinity-ish, except they run a little bit more, a little misdirection and all that stuff. But they started throwing the last couple of years, and are they going to be able to? Is this going to be a quick game? First of all, to me, it feels like it could be if you take the bands out of it, it'll be like 2-hour game.
Cam Pendergraph was the player for Frisco that we were talking about in the district breakdown, who could be a special player for him and kind of get them back to that pounding ground setup. And he ran the ball 18 times for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. For me, the big thing about that Brewer-Frisco game is that Brewer had 6 turnovers in that game, and Frisco had none. And when you go -6 on the turnovers, that's a little bit concerning. And remember, I always give a mulligan. I'll give a mulligan for one time because I think Brewer is a little bit better. I thought Brewer, when we talked about our breakdown, had a chance to get in there over the Colony and Justin Northwest for that last playoff spot. in 3-5A. So I'm not ruling out Brewer quite yet, but Frisco is right in the middle with Frisco Reedy and Frisco Centennial. And I think that they have a really good team, and they're going to be a matchup nightmare for Burleson Centennial. Obviously, you joked about it. It's going to be a pretty quick game, but I think Burleson Centennial is still got a little bit more size than Frisco, and I don't think they're going to give them 6 turnovers in that game. So I think we're going to have a fun kind of a 21-14 game at Burleson Centennial. I think we'll take it.
I got you. Well, Justin Northwest is going to be taking on McKinney North. I told you all I could tell you about McKinney North. They were just it took a little while to get going, but second, third, and fourth quarter, they just dominated, and it got to a running clock in the second half, which I think had probably more to do with the heat than the play on the field. And they're taking on Justin Northwest that got by Rock Hill without Kevin Speary quarterback in there anymore by 8. It's still a 6A team that they beat, a new 6A team, but they did beat them. Talk about how you think this game will go.
You know, when I was looking at the box scores for that Northwest Rock Hill game, I was very curious because, you know, you think of Northwest and their quarterbacks over the last year, you know, they're slinging around. You know, you got Jake Strong, and even before that, you know, they've been throwing the ball quite a bit. And this year they had 2 guys, both have 100-yard games. It looked more like Burleson Centennial. You had Nate Jean run the ball 23 times for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Ife Durodoye ran the ball 18 times for 119 yards. We're starting to get into some Trinity numbers when you're starting to have 40 runs and 2 guys having 100-yard days. Letty Thompson only threw the ball 13 for 18 for 134 yards, just short passes, and take what they will give you. And Rock Hill has a pretty good defense. So the fact that they could continue to just pound the ball consistently on a 6A size, that speaks well for Justin Northwest. So that kind of got up on my radar as far as that goes. And then you got McKinney North, and these 2 teams have played each other, it feels like almost every year, and something crazy happens. You know, it's like, and you know, you always have that head scratcher when McKinney North and Justin Northwest play each other. I'm trying to remember what happened last year. We had I picked Justin Northwest to win the game by 31 last year, based on them beating Rock Hill, and they lost by 12. So you know, Northwest is just all over the place with that. I think Northwest is going, you know, and I've got them very similarly ranked. I think Northwest is going to show up a little bit. I think McKinney North will avenge their loss last year and beat Justin Northwest, but by 7 or so. Just a very close game, like a 28-21 kind of a game. But you sold me on McKinney North. I mean, you told me they weren't really working hard. You're hoping that big tight end was going to get targeted a little bit more, and they're just like, we don't need to put you on film. We're going to save you for the good games like this.
Exactly.
We're going to need you.
Markowitz, yeah, exactly. And of course, he was a little tired as well, because it was pretty hot, man. I'm not going to even lie to you. I saw there's no game at nighttime. I had no idea why that game went at 10:30 in the morning, but either way, I got it. I got to see what they're like. Now, I'm giving you the stage here for Midlothian, because this team is, I mean, I'm going to see this game against Ennis, but boy, that week 1 thing really got me down in the dumps. Now, I'm not knocking Seguin. I like Seguin. They're right where they're at. They're in a tough district. It's very difficult to get in the postseason there, but to be able to shut down that team that's got the best receiver in the nation, or at least the top 5, and they talked about how they're going to mix it up, and all this flex bone is going to set up these deep passes, and to put up 7. And they talked about the coach's son too, Wendell, is supposed to be a solid quarterback. And man, I'm worried about this team. Just talk to me about this game, and maybe talk to me about the futures of this Midlothian team.
I'm very worried about Midlothian, but you know what? I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt because they have good coaching. Everybody's going to have a clunker, and Midlothian's been so good the last couple of years. You know, credit Arlington Seguin. Arlington Seguin has made the rankings this week based on their performance against
Midlothian.
Midlothian, and I think they're going to have a fascinating game this week, and we're going to find out a lot about Arlington Seguin as they continue to go down this road, or because they're in a really tough district. That 5-5A with Ennis and Midlothian Heritage and Everman, it's going to be a test every single week. And you have teams like Burleson who are wanting to get into that mix, and finding your place in that district is going to be tough. We have 5 teams ranked in that district right now. With Arlington Seguin making the rankings now. But Midlothian against Ennis, when you kind of break down the Ennis game, I did have a Waxahachie person tell me they don't think they're going to be playing that Ennis game anymore. So I'm telling you, that 287 battle, you
saw them running around with that sign. It's just a beautiful win. Who gets the sign now? They're playing somebody else.
It doesn't help Waxahachie, and you had Ennis with some home cooking in that game. You look at the penalties, it was very night and day. A lot of Waxahachie penalties and not many Ennis penalties. Waxahachie had a couple of touchdowns called back, but credit Ennis for sticking with it and playing in there, playing that game as detailed and as in depth as they did. I think Midlothian they have to bounce back. I mean, I don't think it's going to be easy. I think they're going to have to fight for it, but I do think they are going to bounce back in this game. Maybe 14-7 kind of a game, because Waxahachie, they scored they had 400 yards. You had Ramon McKinney rush for 115 yards to Mondrick Davis Robinson rushed for 100 yards. This kind of sounds like what Midlothian's going to try to do. And Ennis didn't really have much. Wondami Davis, their quarterback, threw 2 interceptions, ran the ball. They didn't really do much out of that. Then you had Waxahachie with 10 penalties for 90 yards and just couldn't get out of their way. I think Midlothian will play a much cleaner game, but I don't think it's going to be a pretty game. And that Seguin Midlothian game was very low scoring at times. And Midlothian, it seems like they figured it out at the end of the first half, and then at the second half, they just couldn't get anything going again. I think Midlothian will bounce back, but I'm very worried. You asked kind of their big term picture. That's a really tough district to be down in, or to be a middle tier team in, because Colleen Ellison and a couple of the Colleen schools are right there. We saw so many games that were so close last year. And if Midlothian is 14 to 15 points worse than they were last year, which is what Arlington Seguin suggests, they're not going to make the playoffs in this district. So they got to get better. But I do think we're going to get the ship righted against Ennis. I'm going to take a 14-7 slugfest.
If you look at Ennis, boy, it looks like they're really needing a second option besides Gratian Harris. It looks like he was the only guy got any catches. They had him running the ball as well. So we'll have to see how that game goes. Now, speaking about Seguin, it looks like they would just want to play in 4-5A Division II, because they took care of Midlothian. Now they got a Red Oak team they're probably not feeling that good about themselves either, thinking they might have been able to beat the Colony a little bit more convincingly. But now they got home game with Seguin. So talk about that one.
Yeah, and given what I saw with Red Oak in the Colony game, the Colony is such a weird city. We have Iowa Colony down in your neck of the woods, your Houston neck of the woods, who are completely blowing up. Now we have the Colony coming up here in DFW blowing things up. I think it's a little bit of an upset, but I'm going to continue to stay on this Arlington Seguin bandwagon. Just the way they beat Midlothian and there was no luck involved in that win against Midlothian. It was just a dominant victory. Now, maybe if Midlothian played their best football, it would have been a more competitive game. But it was a lot of the fact that Seguin demoralized them with the size of their offensive line, their speed, their talent. I'm not seeing that out of Red Oak right now, to where I think Red Oak's going to be any different than that. I mean, if I'm picking, if Arlington Seguin can beat Midlothian, surely they can beat Red Oak, right? Unless Red Oak has a incredible performance. So I think we're going to see a second straight win from 5-5A Division II, beating our friends in 4-5A Division I. And I'm going to take Arlington Seguin 10 points.
10 points.
10 points, Ward.
Very steadfast professor way of saying 10 points. I like that one. People can believe you when you talk like that. Talk to me about this Granbury and Lake Worth game. I'm sure it's on the call sheet because of my girl Ashley Bullington. Is that why, or is it you got some interesting facts on these two?
I was just fascinated with Granbury this first week. When I was driving through Granbury, I was looking at this city and I'm just like, why are they not better at football? You got Toller just down the street, you got Stephenville just down the street, and they played Creekview this past week, and they beat them by 31. So maybe Granbury is starting to turn it around a little bit. I always say that, they got the first year coach. Do you remember how to say that old coach's name?
Yeah, he said cheese. It's pronounced like cheese, I was told.
Z's.
With all the Z's in it, it's pronounced like cheese. But go ahead.
Pronounced like cheese. So Granbury, and this is part of that 4-5A, kind of a district. They've been waiting to just bounce out, and I think that they can beat Lake Worth in this game. And I think I'm not calling them a playoff team, but I think Granbury is finally starting to trend up a little bit. This is a team. It's a fringe team. They got the Grumps burger place over there that has the big sign that says Granbury, not DFW, since 1885. Well, let me tell you, we're talking about you on the DFW podcast right now. So consider sponsoring us, since you're not DFW. We can find a package for you, Grumps.
Quit being so grumpy.
That's right. It might be you just have to give Ashley free burgers, and we'll work with you here on the DFW podcast. But I think Granbury. I think it's an upset, but that's why one of the reasons why I picked it. I think Granbury is going to upset Lake Worth this week. So give me Granbury to continue their upward trajectory over a pretty good growing Lake Worth team.
Excellent. Well, we got a Reedy team that you've talked ad nauseum about over the summer about it, and they didn't really impress you too much against Azle, but Denison impressed you because they slapped your pick around like it was nobody's business. He had Sherman by 1 million, and they lost by 2 million. So talk to me about this game.
That was my worst. It wasn't my worst thing, but it was my worst spread. It was a 70-point turnover. I had Sherman by 28, and they lost by 42. So you put that together, you got a 70-point turnaround. Could you imagine if I know you're a basketball guy, you got Georgetown and St. John, and you think that Georgetown is going to beat St. John by 28, and then they lose by 42, and you're just like, oh man, Lou Carnesecca does it to us again. You can't.
That would be devastating, man. But I feel your pain. But man, it didn't even look like Sherman came out to play in that one.
No, and a lot of turnovers for Sherman, very sloppy football, and they got to get that fixed. But I'm going to try to give you a couple of numbers. Frisco Reedy won this game last year by 34 points. So they completely dominated Denison, and they beat Azle last year. I wish it was like 50 or 60. So that's what started to really generate our picture that Frisco Reedy was going to be a really good team, going to be competitive. Obviously, had the crazy endings throughout the playoffs and the regular season. Some of the most unbelievable ways of winning a game that Frisco Reedy had. Denison, I think, if you can beat a Sherman team the way they beat the Sherman team, you're definitely better. I'm not saying you're a playoff team or that you're going to beat Melissa or compete with Lovejoy and Melissa, but you're a better team. And I don't think Frisco Reedy is as good. So even though Frisco Reedy is a favorite in this game, I think it's going to be a much closer game than the 34 points last year. I think it's going to be a competitive back and forth kind of a 7 to 10 point game. Frisco Reedy, if Frisco Reedy doesn't win this game, it completely validates everything I've said about them, that, they're a fringe playoff team. They're one of many in Frisco. They're not an elite team anymore. But if they beat Denison, by 42 or something or like they did in the past, I'm going to have to start, apologizing. I'm going to have to get on there and start saying, okay, you're ranked and whatnot. So this is a big game for me to finally assess where Frisco Reedy is, because Azle didn't give us that information, but I think that Denison will give us that information. But I think the information that they're going to give us is that Reedy is a good middle-of-the-road Frisco ISD team, and they only win that game by 7 to 10.
Alrighty, and there's another good one with the Frisco teams. On Thursday night, I may be able to coax you into going again. I know Teddy Ball Game's going over there too, but it's Lake Dallas playing Centennial at the Star. A couple of really good recruits, one on each side, with Keandre Henry being able to catch passes from his guy, and then at Lake Dallas, and then you got Harry Stewart over there for the Titans, and you always got to remember those Titans. So talk to me about that game and what you think might happen, and are you going to be present for it?
I actually think I'm going to go to our bonus game this week. Something is just calling me to that game, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But Frisco Centennial was a team that I talked about in the district breakdown that I thought might have a really good chance of being a surprise team. You had Harry Stewart run the ball 12 times for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jace Patton, very efficient, 10 for 16, 248 yards, 3 touchdowns. They forced 4 turnovers on Richardson, and they didn't give up any turnovers on their end, and had a team total yardage of over 400 yards. I think they're not as complete as Lake Dallas, but I think they're going to continue to show that progression that they're a much better team than a lot of people thought. I think Lake Dallas wins this game. If Lake Dallas ends up blowing them out, I think, maybe I'll have to come off of my Frisco Centennial competing for the playoff spot prediction. But I think if they're competitive with a very good third place Lake Dallas team in that really good 3-5A district, I think they have a chance to compete for that playoff spot. And it says nothing about Lake Dallas. I think it'll say more about Frisco Centennial. So I think Lake Dallas wins this game, but 1-2 scores. I think it'll be much closer than a lot of people think.
Nice. Hope Ted shoots us some good stuff. Let's talk about Lancaster making that long road trip to Kincaid. I think it's a good 2-3 miles to play South Oak Cliff. Probably a game South Oak Cliff's looking forward to out of all their non-district ones. Well, maybe Paris too, but it's one that they can really be competitive in and probably have a good chance of winning it too.
Yeah, last year, Lancaster didn't or last year that Lancaster beat Sauk, but then Sauk was able to beat Parish Episcopal. I was very disappointed in the Lancaster Skyline game as far as the performance from Lancaster. You look at the stats, and Lancaster had 300 yards to Skyline's 100 yards. Had a lot of offensive prowess. You had Carter. It looked like they stuck a little more with Carter Jones. Maybe Coach Paul's backing off of that a little bit. Maybe he's starting to see the light as far as that goes. Jaquavis Pipkin only threw the ball 6 times. Carter Jones threw the ball 22 times. Ward, would you say that's a 50-50 split?
Doesn't seem like it, does it?
Doesn't seem like it. Kwan Lacey had now Pipkin did run the ball a little bit more. He ran the ball 7 times for 59 yards, whereas Carter Jones only ran the ball 2 times for negative 15 yards. Lancaster's got to clean up the offensive turnovers. I think Lancaster is going to win this game by a score just because their defense, obviously holding Skyline to under 100 yards, but their offense has got to become more efficient at finishing those drives. If they got a lot of empty yardage that they can't convert to points, all that offensive firepower that they have coming back is going to ruin the fact that their defense is playing better than expected very early. I think Lancaster should beat South Oak Cliff, but I think it's going to be a heck of a game. But I'm going to take them by 1 score back and forth, kind of maybe a 17-10 kind of a game.
It'd be a good one. What was it, 21-3 last year, right? So yeah, it should be a good one. Talk about Mesquite. Talking about the Skeeters, they got an injured quarterback, and now a game they should win on paper against North Mesquite. Does that make it a little bit more up in the air there now with the quarterback situation?
Well, North Mesquite found that without God's power, North Garland did not fare very well. And I saw some of the computer polls and pundits had North Garland just expecting that, North Mesquite, they're bad. I talked about it a couple of years ago to Tim Cedar. I know you don't like former Cowboys as high school football coaches, but you probably don't like Hebron then either with their new quarterback over there. Got a son of a Dallas Cowboy, but we got which brings it back to Plano East, because that'll be a game you're cheering Plano East on there. But back to Mesquite and North Mesquite. North Mesquite is better. They're just in that very tough luck district. That 7-5A is ridiculous. There are 6 really good teams in that district, and North Mesquite and West Mesquite are just right there looking up at those other 6 going, we can get better, but it's not going to come out in wins. And then you get North Mesquite and Mesquite, that kind of a rivalry. This is a really good chance for North Mesquite to compete against a down Mesquite. I think it's going to be a very fun game. We're going to call it our Teddy Madden game of the week. I think Mesquite is going to win a 35-34 kind of a game where North Mesquite goes for 2 and the win, and just Mesquite barely hangs on. I think it's going to be a very fun game. Mesquite barely wins, but North Mesquite will impress in their loss.
Little bragging rights game. I love it. Hey, last year we saw 105 points out of this Argyle Lovejoy game. That's going to be the rematch at Argyle. In a couple of years, they're going to have that new stadium up there in Argyle too, and then Lovejoy will be like, I guess we got to be the next one to get going on that. But from what I saw and from what you saw, I'm not thinking we're going to see 105 this time unless Lovejoy scores them all or something like that. Argyle's a young team, and I know they'll get better as the season goes along, but man, to start off with Melissa and Lovejoy with as young of a team as they have, it's a tall task, but they do get them at home, so maybe they can hang around for a bit.
They do, but Lovejoy, this is the kind of team that I think Lovejoy is going to get up big on, very much like Melissa did, just because of the matchups. I mean, who's going to cover Parker Livingstone for Argyle? I mean, he's just going to get out there. I mean, you can't double him, because you double him, then Dalen McCutcheon and Jalen Lott are going to have field days. One thing I don't like about Lovejoy is they kind of run this cover zero aggressive defense at times, to where, they expect their DBs to make one-on-one tackles. And if you get by them, you get big yardage and score. That was what College Station scored 2 of their touchdowns was on blown coverages where, that cover zero where nobody was back there, wide receiver hit the sideline, gone, kind of a thing. So Argyle might be able to take it. Coach Rogers is obviously one of the best coaches in the state. He's going to find a wrinkle probably to save them a touchdown or so in that. But I can't see Argyle looking at this offense and going, oh, this is a break compared to Melissa. Obviously, Lovejoy is going to have a much more potent offense than Melissa did. But what Lovejoy doesn't have is the defense that Melissa has. So I think Argyle is going to have a little bit more offensive success, but I don't think they're going to stop Lovejoy at all. So I don't think we're going to see the shootout that we saw last year, but I do think we're going to see some points on the scoreboard. I think Lovejoy will win a 49-28 kind of a game.
So, and speaking about Melissa, they're taking on China Spring. That's a couple of powers in there. And yeah, Nate Jukin had such a great game. See, that's the difference for the Argyle. They had guard the run in that first game, and then this game, and the Lovejoy is probably going to pass all over him. But talk to me about the Melissa China Spring game. What you think might come out of that one?
Yeah, this is one of those revenge games, that Melissa has to try to fix what happened last year and bounce back. They lost to Argyle. They lost to China Spring. I think they lost by 1 point to China Spring last year. I do think they will get their win back against China Spring, but I think it'll be a little bit closer than the Argyle game was. Obviously, the heart of a champion with China Spring. I know some people at China Spring are worried seeing that score against Argyle. They're instantly like, it's like we're playing Duncanville all of a sudden, and they're starting to get a little PTSD. Like, what's going to happen? We're just a little 4A school over here. Come on, y'all. Melissa got the $30 million stadium, and they're beating Argyle. They're about to be a 6A. Be nice to us. And it was a good game when they scheduled it a couple of years ago. But I think China Spring, this is the kind of game that's going to make China Spring better and make them better for a December run. Melissa should win this game. I think they'll win this game by 14 points. But I don't think it's going to be this big blowout like Argyle was.
Gotcha.
And if it is, that Division 2 is going to get real salty.
You're going to pull back on Summit some if that happens there? Because I'm riding Melissa.
Summit just rolled a 6A team in the District of Doom by 50. So
yeah, I think regardless of what happens, these first couple of weeks, that the 5A Division 2 playoffs, when we get in the later rounds, are really going to be fun. And I'm excited about all the 3 teams that we really kind of talking about. What you talk about, 4 if you talk about Stock, Lovejoy, Melissa, Summit, and there's other teams I'm not even mentioning. That it's going to be fun, I think. And you called that one.
Yeah, you even go down that. You just keep going down and keep going down 5A. I think if we had like a little, where we had 5A Division 2 versus 5A Division 1 and just started going off, you're probably going to see 5A Division 2 win more of those games. Frisco Emerson's the team we're excited about. Argyle, Grapevine, Everman, Midlothian Heritage, Ennis, Lake Dallas, Arlington Seguin. We're talking about Arlington Seguin potentially knocking off 2 straight Division 1 schools. Division 2 has got some power this year, especially in our region. I think whoever gets out of that state semifinal, that top half of the bracket, probably going to be a favorite over whoever you guys in the Houston show bring out for us.
Could be a sacrificial lambs or whatever. Talk about Colleyville Heritage against Texas High. Boy, you look at that box score of Texas High, and they talk about jumping out on somebody. When they played Lone Star, 27 first half points. That's or first quarter points, right? Is if I'm reading that right? Now my guy Davion Gross still did good for Lone Star. He's last year I rode Peyton Bowen, but I got 3 years to ride Davion Gross over there at Lone Star. But now Texas High is coming this way to take on Colleyville Heritage. You think they still win that game?
We talk about, I mentioned the Mulligans, and this is the game I was really referring to. Frisco Lone Star with 6 turnovers. Colin Blackstone with three interceptions and then 3 other fumbles. Just not what, I've never seen Lone Star have this much of a self-destruction sort of a game. And they had to go to East Texas, drive 3 hours to a state-ranked program, and they almost won. They were a -4 in turnovers, lost by 8 on the road to a state-ranked team in a game they should have had no business even being in. And they had so many self-inflicted wounds. And on one hand, Lone Star, is this going to be what their MO is this year? Because you remember Brock last year. I know you don't want to talk small schools, and you shut me down when I start talking about small schools. But Brock, even in that game against Franklin, as you remember, turnovers. They could not get out of their own way. And if Frisco Lone Star is going to be that version of the team, they're not going to be very good this year, especially in their region. But if they can clean that up, I think it's very clear. If they only had 3 turnovers against Texas High, they probably win that game. But 6 was just too much to overcome. And all that to mention that you're going to have Texas High come out here and now play Colleyville Heritage. I'm not as high on Colleyville Heritage as I am on Frisco Lone Star. So I think Texas High comes out here and wins that game. But it's one of those things that it wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden Colleyville Heritage wins that game and we're all like, we're scratching our head here, because I think a lot of people are going to look at that Texas High 48 in beating Frisco Lone Star and give it more weight than it should, just because of the fact that who they beat and the way they beat them. If Frisco Lone Star played a clean, perfect game, they probably win that game, 35-21 or something.
They hit on a lot of big plays in that one too. A lot of big plays. Yeah. And it's just the turnovers, like you said.
Week 1, you can't do that. But they had 500 yards on them, held Texas High to 374. Usually when you score 48 points, you got a lot more yardage than 374 yards total. Rushing, they only had 134 yards. I think this is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think. I'm going to take Texas High, but it would not surprise me if Colleyville Heritage found a way to win this game.
All right, and Arlington Heights in this district, they were the darling last year, and they started off the season with a nice win, and they're taking on Panther Creek. Talked about that game.
Yeah, Panther Creek is a fascinating school for me. Everybody said they're going to be much better. They started to kind of evoke Frisco Emerson talk, and Braxton Roberts went 27 for 31 with 430 yards and 5 touchdowns against Frisco Independence. And that was a team that has made the playoffs in 5A in the past. Obviously, that's no slouch. I think Frisco Panther Creek is going to upset Arlington Heights by 14 points. And I think that speaks to Frisco Panther Creek, and that's going to be a really good 4A battle with Carter, Frisco Panther Creek, and Salina, because Panther Creek, kind of like Emerson, looks like they got everybody back, and they've got some talent. So keep an eye on Frisco Panther Creek. You have to get a bobblehead made for them.
That's interesting, because we talked in the summer about how Prosper, they're opening up their new school and it's diluting the talent. But Frisco's got 10, 11, 12 schools, and every time they open up one, it seems like they're extremely talented right off the bat.
Well, they're just pulling from Frisco Lone Star. That's the problem. You just kind of build from them and do that. But Lebanon Trail and Frisco Memorial have both been, two teams that have not really done anything, and they're looking to build that tradition. But Panther Creek has a very special class of kids, and obviously to beat Frisco Independence the way they did, that caught my eye.
Well, let's talk about our bonus game, man. Who do you have in your bonus game, and how come, and what do you think is going to happen?
This is one of those things that I'm just going to talk and say loving things, because I don't really know about it. Walnut Creek, we know that we talked about Prosper opening up schools. Walnut Creek is playing a Renegade schedule where they're open, but they're not in the UIL district, and they are just playing who they can find. And we know that they had Prosper starting quarterback and a couple other people that had to go over there. Rock Hill got rocked with some of the depth, because from what I understand with Prosper, they didn't give you an option. If you were zoned to Walnut Grove. Doesn't matter if you were a starter at Prosper, you're over there now. And if you're living there, you're there. And so you got this Walnut Grove school that is not playing UIL football, but has a pretty good team, obviously has beautiful facilities. And so they scheduled a team in Arkansas who won the 4A state championship, because, you got to schedule who you can. And they beat them 57-54, a 4A Arkansas school that this team beat the very first game they played. And remember, Lake Belton kind of did this, and they went 10-0, and I think Shadow Creek went 10-0, and now they've scheduled Gunter. And this is just such a fascinating game because we have no idea. I mean, we have no history from Walnut Creek of what we're going to get, but Gunter is the defending 3A state champion out here, and what are we going to get? I mean, I'm going to go see Gunter and Brock in 2 weeks, and that's why I'm kind of going back and forth. But if Walnut Grove can beat Gunter, would that not be one of the most incredible things, and really just put this school on the radar when, you haven't even heard of them yet? They haven't played an official district varsity game to beat Gunter. And we always talk about these hypotheticals, what would happen if, Duncanville played Gunter, or this, that, or what would DeSoto and Brock be like? This is kind of that, dream game. You got a 5A, 6A size school against the best 3A Division II school. What's going to happen? I'm fascinated because I have no clue what's going to happen. Obviously, I'm probably going to take Gunter, it's Gunter. But, if Walnut Grove beats them, I mean, it doesn't say anything bad about Gunter. It's just like Walnut Grove, that's going to get on my radar. I'm completely fascinated by the idea of a school that cannot win a state championship beating a state champion.
Now, you've got me fairly baffled because you've gone back and forth between Walnut Grove and Walnut Creek. Now, tell me which one it really is for the fans.
Maybe it's Walnut Hill, Walnut Hill Road over there on.
Just say Walnut and be done with it.
I think it's China Grove, so Walnut Grove.
All right, Walnut Grove.
Walnut Grove. I apologize. Okay. I'm so excited about Walnut Grove. Just can't even. They're not even UIL districted. I can't even remember. I know they got Coach Allison over there, who's a fantastic coach. They got a really good quarterback over there. So
they'll be districted next year, though, right? In the next realignment. So it'll be interesting. They'll certainly announce themselves if they can stay close with Gunter or even beat them. That's an announcement. That's like sending out your wedding announcement. We're here.
I'll be back. So, Ward, you should send a camera crew out there and get them ready for next year. Just have that footage ready for Walnut Grove.
That is true. Instead of pulling off huddle stuff, right?
That's right.
Well, it's going to be a fun week, too. I'm excited. I know we've gone on for a while here, but there's a lot of games to preview, and the non-district games are always the most exciting. And I mean, obviously, there's nothing up for grabs, so you can go all out in these deals. So I will see you out somewhere.
And there's a lot of games we didn't talk about, and that's the problem. I mean, you've said Diggs. You can't be going for 4 hours on these things. You just can't do that.
I know you want to, but you can't. I wanted to talk about OD Wyatt, and are we nervous about them because
I fired them. I already kicked them out of the rankings. They're done. Like I'm completely done with them.
That was our Fort Worth darling this year, just like
Arlington Heights.
You're already done with them.
Panther Creek and all kinds of stuff. We just
Hey, one thing I do want to say is this Friday, if you're looking for a game in the Fort Worth area, Polytech is taking on Samuel at their own school. It's the first time they played there in several years. They're actually not going to one of the ISD stadiums. They're going to play at their own school, so it's going to be small. It's going to be nice. It's the first time they've really done that, so it could be a nice environment, especially if you live around that area. I don't know how competitive the game will be, but it'll be a pretty interesting game. And I know my man James Harris will be there. James Harris will be there working on a story for us this Saturday, so that'll be pretty cool. All right, Diggs, we will see you at some games this week, and then we'll do it all again next week.
I'm excited. Have a cup of coffee, and we'll see you down the road.
All righty.